This little man, he can freestyle. Z, come on up here, man. Hey, I'm gonna get him on the mic real quick. Do you want a beat? All right, he goes by Z Charger. Say, what up, Z Charger? What up, Z Charger? What up, Z Charger? Spit it, Z Charger. Spit it, Z Charger.
Like a river, living the life in the res. My Tezzy's full stuff. I puff another blow of my asthma, bruh. Yo, I'm living, driven to defeat. No, stand up with my feet, rapping to this beat. Take a seat now. I'm here to rule forever. Never is never. Now I got a Beretta. I do whatever for my land, cause this is our area, our territory. Yo, we had treaties, now they beat me down like this is their land. I can take a stand for my people, step to the steeple of Christianity. No, yo, because this is my religion, and I'm living what I gotta do. Gotta do what I gotta do just to count cool on my enemy.
Give it up, Z Charger!
Wow, thank you to the control room for that. I did not know that we had access to that video. I haven't seen that video. That might be the second time that I've ever seen that video. Lila Daya Yahipelo, Oyate Iyuha, Kola Iyuha Ichichiab. And I happen to know that that's welcome everybody. I greet all of you as my friend. You are all related to me. We are all related to everything that is, was, and ever will be. And thank you for sharing the stream. I ask you to share the stream. Thank you for logging on. As always, you can catch this show live almost all the time at 5 o'clock Mountain Time, 6 o'clock Central, 4 o'clock Pacific, every single Wednesday. And if we change that, we do want to accommodate some of the other content creators out there. And I recently had a discussion with Native Roots Radio, and they are big supporters of this show. I'm a big supporter of their show, but we don't want to cut into each other's time and be having to compete with each other when we can just switch the timing. And they've been going live daily for a long time. I want you to check them out, Native Roots Radio. But until we adjust our schedule, thank you all for tuning in with us. Thank you all for, I better get a charge on this computer. As you can tell, I'm not broadcasting from the studio because life has been extremely busy, moving extremely fast. And I just, I'm grateful for it. In our way, one of our teachers told us to say, Tukashla ota makuelo, which means grandfather. And that is a term of honor to Creator. Grandfather, give me more, meaning increase my capacity to handle more responsibility, more obligation, more duties. We are very blessed, those of us who are able to join the stream, those of us who have seemingly too much to do. I know that my life feels like that sometimes. With the COVID pandemic, with all of our children having to endure the pandemic and the closing in of their world, that is not to mention the very acute and incomprehensible confrontation that our children are having within their own sacred being relating to the collapse of civilization as they have sold it to us, a civilization that has brought the human species to the brink of extinction. We are in this moment together, and our children are very, very much aware of what's going on, and their urgency is what is driving them to different levels of creation. It is driving them to call on us, the older generation. It is driving them to line 3. If you haven't been paying attention, which I'm sure you have, we've covered line 3 every chance we get on this program. There's been over 600 arrests right now. And I want to just give you a bit of a rundown of the show that we got tonight, because it starts with line 3. And we are hoping to be joined by a very special guest, a very honored guest, the founder or one of the founders. I'm not sure about the history there, but Red Lake Treaty Camp, as you may or may not know, there's been 16 arrests there in the past half a day, maybe 18 hours. So we're going to start with line 3, and then we'll move right along to something called House Resolution 1374. This is a bill that has come out of the House of Representatives by a wide margin, and it seeks to empower the fossil fuel industry under the guise of protecting ourselves from cyber attacks on our fossil fuel energy infrastructure. What happened with Colonial Power Plant, or Colonial, I don't remember the name of that facility in oil, petroleum facility, was shut down by hackers. Anyhow, we're going to tell you a little bit about that. Some of you may know about that. Hopefully you do. I know that I'm speaking to the wokest audience that ever could be. So after this, we'll address, give you a highlight, something that I was able to see on the social medias, which fits right in with the LANDBACK prophecy, and that is the Nez Perce homecoming, or Nez Perce relatives, who we call the Poré Chloka, or the people that have pierced noses. They are our relatives. They are our allies. We've been through a lot together, and we've supported each other over the course of our histories. But they something big happened for them, and we want to tell you about that a little later in the show. And then we will round it out with something extremely devastating, extremely serious, something that is also coming to light with the ongoing exposure, or the ongoing unearthing of mass graves at church-run, government-sponsored, Canada and the United States sponsored torture institutions, otherwise known as residential schools and boarding schools. With that has come a reckoning that is allowing for the truth, for the first time in a lot of our histories, allowing for the truth to come through. And I didn't even hear about the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum. It is the only such asylum in this country. And it's not some dark chapter. This is this country's history. The United States and Canada are built upon, premised upon, contemplate the genocide and complete demise of indigenous nations. We are just now beginning to find this out on the scale that we needed to be seeking these kinds of truths all throughout our collective experience here in what is now sometimes referred to as the United States, on Turtle Island, in the indigenous Americas, before they were called the Americas, I know that I get the great opportunity, the huge responsibility of doing my best to explore these truths, to share them with you in real time, and to urge you to subscribe to our podcast, where you can hear all previous 25 episodes. This is episode number 26, which means for 26 straight weeks, we've been able to come to you live and direct. Only one of those shows was a pre-record, a full pre-record, and that was because of ceremony. You know, a lot of our indigenous people still have ceremonial duties ongoing right now. So long as the Thunders are able to come at any time that they please, we are bound to uphold our end of the bargain and do our ceremonies, at least out here in and around the Black Hills. But that goes from the Pacific coast to the Atlantic coast to the Gulf, all the way up to the Arctic. These ceremonies have existed and still exist, fortunately, to this day. And line 3, if I could take us back to our topic of line 3, some of you were able to see that we did a show there last week. We were able to be on the ground and to take stock for ourselves, to go and join our brothers and sisters, and most importantly, to join our non-binary, gender-fluid relatives at Camp Magezi. And also, we did not get to catch up with Tara Hauska of the GNU Collective, which is also a very explicit, safe space for our two-spirit relatives. I did not realize that I was raised as a heteronormative, cisgendered man. I didn't have to explore that. That's the privilege that we have as heteronormative or cisgendered males. We don't have to fight for space within our resistance circles, because that space was kind of built by us and favored us, and much to the detriment of the movement. We've inherited a lot of traumas, a lot of dysfunctions as the cis demographic of Indian country, and we're working on those deficiencies because we are now realizing, as men, we are realizing that we have a greater awareness to seek. And I want to speak about that because these camps, Camp Magezi, which is founded by and led by Tasha Martineau, are spaces where our non-binary, two-spirit, gender-fluid, LGBTQ, queer peoples are centered, are safe, do not have to worry about the ignorance or the bigotry or the snide jokes or being made, you know, the butt of people's humor. We've really got to check ourselves in that respect, because queer people are showing up on the front line. You might have seen Alex Golden Wolf. You might have seen Spotted Wolf. They were both arrested at Red Lake Treaty Camp in a ceremonial action that we were not able to witness, because when we got on the ground, there were police roadblocks already constructed. There was a line of police all the way across Highway 32, and we weren't able to get in. But from the first time that I started interacting with Camp Magezi, I learned that we are unlearning the dysfunctions that were passed down to us in brutal fashion, that still live inside of our people, in our hearts and in our minds, and causes us to drink so much haterade causes us to internally oppress each other. Lateral violence, lateral oppression. This is a very, very real thing in indigenous country. We cannot stand to see other indigenous peoples make it, succeed, get put on, blow up, go platinum, whatever it is. Something inside of us is it just causes us to question their success, to want to find some item, some black mark in their past, in their history. How can we tear this person down? That is something that we have to deal with as indigenous peoples, because those on the outside, those of our supporters who are waiting to help us along in our path to liberation, they don't know what's going on there. Just like Line 3 is not like Standing Rock. At Standing Rock, you can go to one place. You can go to one place, and that is where the cameras, that is where the frontliners, that is where the intention, the mojo, the recognition, the spirit of the movement was collected physically in one place. At Line 3, there are several different camps that are all autonomous, and in some respects that is good because they can't all get raided at the same time. But we need to give them a shout out here. I very much want you to follow Camp Magizi, because that is who we spent our time with when we're on the ground. But we've got people on the ground right now, as do other organizations. And in the spirit of cooperation, we all need to be boosting each other because we are running out of time. Sasha Bolio is the founder of Red Lake Treaty Camp. I remember in the dead of winter when her and he might be a council member, he might be the vice president, I'm not 100% sure, but let me get a sip of that. But Sam Strong, brother Sam Strong, is a Red Lake legislator from the tribal government, from the Red Lake Nation. And they founded the Red Lake Treaty Camp to be a ceremonial space. The Anishinaabe people have a treaty right to access ceded territory for hunting, for fishing, and for ceremonial rights. So this camp, if you look on social media and you find Red Lake Treaty Camp, you'll be able to see just how active the GNU Collective has been. This is where Tara Hauska was arrested just recently. This is where 16 people over the last day, the last matter of hours, were arrested. I just got word that Firelight, another camp fighting Line 3, had 6 people arrested in the last half a day. So I wanted to give you an idea of Line 3. Thank you all for paying attention. Thank you all for linking with Camp Magizi, M-I-G-I-Z-I, GNU Collective, G-I-N-I-W Collective. There's another one, Rise and Engage. I don't know if that's their Facebook tag or their handle, but that's definitely their Twitter handle. That's where I found out about the Firelight arrestees. And that is Rise and Engage. And then, of course, there's Tara Hauska's personal Twitter, which I would also follow, and it's Zhabawekwe, Z-H-A-A. I would just urge you to check those out. We'll put them up. Maybe at the end of the show, we'll put a link in the comments to all the different camps, because I know that people have been able to see StopLine3.org, which as far as we can tell, is hosted by, or definitely includes, Honor the Earth. And that, of course, is Winona LaDuke. We were just at, not Palisades, but the Shell Creek horse camp when the totem pole came through there. These are all different camps, autonomous, fighting the same financial extractive war machine that is now working with the Northern Lights Task Force, which has now arrested more than 600 people on the ground in and around Line 3. And when I say Line 3, you've got to understand that there's geographical distances between these camps. But we had one of our team members, several team members, including Brother Chuck, Brother Mike, even River. He is an in-kind team member. I mean, we're just up there trying to figure out how we can be useful. You know, in these spaces, what most people don't realize is that there's a lot of friendly jostling over how the resistance should take place. And it complicates things, but it's also necessary because we might not have worked together before. A lot of us now fortunately know each other from Standing Rock, but when Standing Rock was going on, it was very, very much dealing with each other at arm's length. And right now, we're starting to create a critical mass at Line 3. Not we as a team, but we're able to witness it. We're able to participate in it because we are all facing the same racist oligarchy, the same extractive financial complex that is literally destroying our planet. And we have a video, it's a 1-minute video. I want to show it to you because it's going to give you a sense. Thank you for that, Control. We will put this up throughout the show so that you can find out where to follow whom. I think that's a use, that there's a whom in there, not a who. But if you are compelled, those are some of the places that you should follow. Rise and Engage will also be on there. But I want to show you this 1-minute video because it gives you a sense of the gravity of the situation. So if we could roll that in, Control, please do.
Bonjour. Today is August 3rd, and we are at the Mississippi River, and Enbridge has been pushing through and building this pipeline. Went under Mississippi 60 feet. They work all night with lights, machines, horrible grinding, screeching sounds. One night the earth shook. They have lined up the pipes and welded them together so that they come complete. I've never liked saying the word raping Mother Earth, but I've come to understand and use. That's the only word I can use to describe what is happening. But they're slowly and carefully raping our mother and contaminating her blood. We are not separate from nature. We are all related. We are nature. Miigwech, thank you for listening.
We cannot ignore the force of that woman's word, and that comes from Firelight Camp, 5 miles west of Coffee Pot Landing. And if you were following, I know that Honor the Earth and was active at Coffee Pot Landing, and I know that GNU Collective and Red Lake Treaty Camp was active right at Red Lake Treaty Camp, and that Camp McGeezy was active right south of Thief River Falls, Seven Clans Casino. I can't remember the name of this little town, but it's where one of our compadres, one of our executives here for the Lakota People's Law Project, was arrested there trying to capture media for Camp McGeezy. Plummer, that's the name of that little town. You've got to realize that there are several different work sites all in and around the area where the camps are at, and each camp is probably separated by 1.5 to 2.5 hours of total travel time. They're relatively close on the map, but the roads are just you gotta plan your trip up there. And I do know there is one very ample space that people can go camp, and that is at the Red Lake Treaty Camp. So I would advise you to find them on Facebook. And I've been in, speaking with different organizers and trying to figure out again how we can be useful, how we can help out, and be the most utilitarian without interfering with all of the work that people have been doing there on the ground and in the courts, in the halls of legislatures for over 6 years. I was just on a call last night with Tara Hauska, and I found out that they've been fighting this for 6 to 7 years. I remember after Standing Rock when Tara and others founded Makwa, M-A-K-W-A, Camp Makwa, or Makwa Camp, which means bear in the Anishinaabe language, the Ojibwa language. And after having gone to Line 3 and interfacing and meeting with and being able to hang out with Tasha Martineau and Jason Goward of Camp McGeezy, they are calling out to and asking the Oceti Sakowin Confederacy, the Dakota, the Lakota, Nakota, the people who also have ancestral ties to that land, to those waters. Line 3 is set to cross over 200 waterways, more than several hundred wetlands, where Anishinaabe people still rice. They call it wild rice, but they still subsist. The Red Lake Nation, White Earth, Leech Lake. There's one more there, by Hinckley. There's also another one right there by Leech Lake and Red Lake. I'm blanking the name of it, but the Anishinaabe people still very much rely on the health of these river systems. They have a treaty right to hunt and to fish and to provide for themselves with those relatives, with those quote unquote resources. The Anishinaabe people followed the vision of one of their prophets a long time ago, and they came westward. They were told to follow the path until they reached a place where food grew on water. So they are there in a sacred way, and they are asking us to join them now on the front line because they do not have a lot of time. And I just want to say about that much concerning Line 3. When we hear that drill bit, as Camp Firelight said, raping Mother Earth, there's no other way to describe that. And it has reached the point now where people are being brutalized. Tara Hauska and others were hit with bodily harm bullets. These are not rubber bullets. These are not less lethal. They can kill. They have certainly maimed people. At Standing Rock, 2 people lost their eyes. 1 eye each. A woman lost her whole arm, Sophia Wolanski. Tara Hauska has now been shot by these bullets, as others have. There are people sacrificing right now. Allies, media, people in the media are being arrested. Not only our own compadre and cohort, Danny Paul Nelson, who was arrested, but chose not to center himself because he is a white male, and there are 600 other peoples being arrested, being brutalized by all of those law enforcement on the ground. But there was another brother, a media brother named River, who was assaulted, who was accosted. The police are creating confrontation so that they can make arrests, and they're hoping that we lash out so they can twist the narrative, just like they did at Standing Rock. These protesters are violent, unruly. You know, lock up your ranch and your farm because somebody's killing cattle out here. Somebody's stealing farm animals. I mean, it was like something that came out of yellow journalism from the late 1800s, something out of a dime novel that painted indigenous peoples as unruly, savage, and bloodthirsty, lawless. This is what they're trying to create. And we have a video. I forgot about this video with River, but media is now getting arrested at Line 3. I want to show you a very short video, and then we'll pick up and conclude Line 3. And if our guest should happen to pop in later, Control, just let me know on the screen, and we'll be sure to bring her on. But if we could roll that video, let's do that, please.
It was later in the day. There was actions going on all morning, but there was a few people still out in the woods and stuff, so I just hopped in a truck with my camera, and someone who was driving in another car got pulled over, and I just asked the officer why this person was being arrested.
Why is he getting arrested?
They pulled me over. Get back in your car now. Helping with the evacuation. Okay, you can go to jail.
I said, "You're going to jail," and grabbed my camera. He ended up maneuvering behind me with his arm and lifting me off the ground in a chokehold and getting my camera onto the ground, and that's why I'm wearing this neck brace. I was thrown in the squad car and put in for 2 nights, and they took my camera and they wanted all my footage. I'm shooting mainly for Indian Country Communications out of Hayward, Wisconsin, but through that I also, you know, work with other organizations, like including Camp McGeezy and Honor the Earth and Red Lake. This Northern Lights Task Force, which is an alliance of counties, they are really conspiring with Enbridge against the public and against water protectors and our freedom of speech and the press.
That's what happened at Standing Rock. There was a time when you could tell some outside private security intelligence officers, the same companies that were at work there as mercenaries were on. They're here. They guarantee you they're here. So the only way we were able to get any of that information is through when they charged me with the felony out there. We were able to get through the discovery process, find out just how deep the rabbit hole goes.
In a lot of cases, this stuff just goes undocumented. This could be a good thing, not just for me, but like a lot of other people, if it's shared in the right way, like what they're actually doing.
That's my first time seeing that video. I want to send our love and our voice out to River, who you saw in that video. He was jerked around by his neck and suffered unknown levels of strain or sprain or damage of unknown nature right now. So he's got to wear that brace. And we want to help River get his story out there. So if anybody is interested, we would welcome, you know, putting you in touch with River. But that video, thank you for that, Brother Chris. People, the wizards behind the curtain here, you know, the control room. When I say the control room, I'm referring to our team at Cut to the Chase. You know, we've come a long way, and we're not stopping anytime in the foreseeable future, because we all have stories to tell, and it's my distinct honor to link up with people like all of you who are on this stream. You have an opportunity to join this conversation. I can see you. I can see your comments. I just saw Brother Duck logged on. I owe you a phone call. That's Donald Long Soldier. I can see your comment there. I agree, brother. We need to go to line 3. And that's why we went up there to kind of do an initial scouting mission to find out what's what, you know, to find out who we talk to, how we can integrate, and how we can be of service. Now, last night on one of the coordinating calls, Tara Hauska, you know, the GNU Collective is just like Camp McGeezy, one of frontline direct action camps. And so in order to help out there, you've got to be willing to subject yourself to a screening process. You got to submit a resume. They want to see your resume. Much like at Standing Rock, anytime you met somebody new, who vouches for you? You know what I mean? Like this infiltration, the levels of the security state that are implicated by our collective stance against the extractive oligarchy brings about the highest levels of interference, infiltration, brutality, and behind the scenes subversion. This is why House Bill 1374 is even an item. And I want to transition right there. And like, again, if our guest shows up, we're going to bring you right to her, because this is life on the front line. You don't always have reception. You can't always check your schedule. You can't always pencil in and commit yourself to be here or there at a certain time or space so that you can get your message out. But I want to definitely ask people to go follow Red Lake Treaty Camp, at Red Lake Treaty Camp, Camp McGeezy, at Camp McGeezy, GNU Collective, at GNU Collective. We are looking to work with everyone. That is just who we have run into so far, who we know from Standing Rock, and who we trust. And then that is an important thing, because people end up charged with felonies. People end up in prison. People end up political prisoners. People end up targeted by the tiger swans of the world. Tiger Swan, I'm never going to let them escape their responsibility for what they did to us at Standing Rock. I know they listen to our streams. I've heard through different channels that Tiger Swan pays attention, that some of them have remorse for being on the wrong side of history there. But people were brutalized. People were harmed, and people were on the wrong side of history. And we lost in that respect. There is oil flowing through illegally at Standing Rock. And after Standing Rock, after no DAPL, in estimated 37 states, in estimated 116 bills or different versions of bills by state legislatures since the time of DAPL have been passed, have been attempted to be passed, that would crack down on people who are willing to stand up to the extractive oligarchy, people who are willing to exercise their natural rights, their birthrights, their constitutional rights, their treaty rights to free speech, their rights to peaceably assemble. And you have seen now with House Bill 1374, and we're going to move on to House Bill 1374 while we wait, just in case our guest shows up. But you may have seen through NDN Collective, through Bruce Ellison, the leak of this information, which validated the concerns of water protectors on the ground out here who were ready to fight Keystone XL pipeline. That includes Roots Camp, Oscar High Elk, Sister Tiff, Brother Alex. That includes Jacelyn Charger, who was also arrested in a direct action. Oscar High Elk is still facing charges, but during that time, South Dakota's National Guard published rules of engagement, a protocol that they would follow with respect to KXL pipeline protest. And in those protocols, in those rules of engagement, they were authorized to use lethal force. It was a whole handbook on how we were able to tell these oligarchic forces are now telling state legislatures, willing, radical right state legislatures who are welcoming the legislation that is drafted by the very same companies that are destroying our rivers, the Enbridges of the world, the Energy Transfer Partners of the world. They are now drafting legislation that is intended to criminalize water protectors, intended to criminalize the people who are standing up to defend Mother Earth, who know in their hearts, who can feel it, that we are in a time of prophecy. South Dakota had one such law. It's called the riot boosting laws, which sought to criminalize even those of you who would like to support the front line. Well, there is something like this, and it's making its way through our halls of government. It has passed the United States Congress by an enormous margin of 398 votes to 21 votes. And that happened on June 22nd of this year, 2021. So this House Bill 1374, I believe it's called the Energy Security Bill. This is important because these forces are trying to make it a matter of national security. Again, they are trying to call us terrorists, religiously driven eco-jihadists or indigenous jihadists. They are responsible for House Bill 1374. They are also responsible for those aspects of the Patriot Act, those aspects of the National Defense Authorization Act, which happens every year, which allows the courts in our country, federal courts in our country, to dish out terrorism enhancements in their sentencing procedure. If you are not aware, if you have not seen, and if you watch Cut to the Chase, you have seen and you have heard about Jessica Reznicek. You have heard about Ruby Montoya. Jessica Reznicek had these terrorism enhancements used against her in her sentencing. She has now been sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. The last I remember, they are, of course, appealing that sentence. People need to know about Jessica Reznicek. Ruby Montoya is still facing sentencing for the Dakota Access Pipeline. They, as far as we can tell, I've been paying very close attention to Ruby Montoya. We are deadly concerned that this same judge will try to use the same terrorism enhancement to unjustly and for political reasons imprison Ruby Montoya. We cannot let that happen. We cannot allow these forces who are behind House Bill 1374, the Energy Security Bill, innocuously called this, which would declare all of sometimes these foreign companies, pipelines, their pump stations, all of that infrastructure critical energy infrastructure. They are doing their damnedest. The energy sector, the private energy, fossil fuel industry is doing everything they can to make sure that we cannot pose any kind of credible opposition to their continued encroachment on our rights and death wish to continue to march us all to certain ecological collapse. There are a few congressional reps like Cori Bush, like AOC, like Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and others that I can't think of right now who are standing on the right side in a fight for our rights, in a fight for our lives, for our freedoms, for our liberties, for all of these inalienable rights. People need to know right now that we are in the fight for our lives, for our freedoms, against an extractive oligarchy which instigates race oppression and subjugation, as well as working class oppression and subjugation. That is our enemy. That is who seeks to imprison us on Mother Earth in the largest open-air prison ever known. That is who seeks to restrict our movements. That is who seeks to imprison us if we stand up against them. Thank you, Stephen Fasthorse, for saying free Leonard Peltier. Leonard Peltier is also in prison because of his willingness and his bravery and courage to stand up against those forces which were brutalizing women and children here on the Pine Ridge Reservation. But I just thought that you should hear about House Bill 1374. We will, and I would encourage you to log on to our lead sponsor, our flagship sponsor, Lakota People's Law Project. There is a petition that you can sign. You can sign up, and you know, you might receive an email a week from me or from Madonna Thunderhawk. But if you are so inclined, sign up so you can get the latest updates. We are able to inform you of these processes and these struggles. You know, whether we like it or not, we're in this struggle. We were born into this dynamic, and we have to choose sides. There's no sitting on the sideline. This is not a spectator sport. There is no just watching the struggle or the revolution go by or happen. Like, we have to get into it. And it's hard because we did not create these institutions of law, these institutions of government or economy, but those institutions are eating our souls alive. The longer that we are not aware of what they're doing, we are not aware of their programming in the spiritual warfare that is being inflicted upon all of us. They are very adept at stealing people's sacred life experiences, our right to connect with the sacred universe. It's impeded by these forces. And this ain't no conspiracy jive here. This is real talk. And I want to thank you all for showing up for it. And that'll conclude my thoughts on House Bill 1374. But I wanted to give a shout out to Lakota People's Law Project. There's a petition going on that site. You can also find out everything that we're doing, that they're doing. You know, Cut to the Chase is its own entity. We do appreciate all your subscriptions. We appreciate those of you who have become financial subscribers. It's one thing to be able to do the show out of the compelling goodness of our hearts. but it's another to be empowered by those financial contributions. And we will continue to do this work. I just saw a member of the Standing Rock Treaty Council who are fighting behind the scenes to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. And I want to send my word of encouragement, my energy, anything that I have that is good. I want to send it to everybody out there who's fighting these fights. We cannot get weary. We cannot give in. We've always got to continue. Now, I want to take a minute to talk about the Nez Perce. And I'm sorry that we couldn't get some of our brothers or sisters to join us tonight, but they, you know, you should know what is happening with the Nez Perce. Much like the LANDBACK prophecies, which are being carried out in the Black Hills and all over indigenous country, the Nez Perce people were able to reclaim some of their ancestral territory. It's been a long time since they were removed, forcibly removed from their territory, from Nimiipuu territory, and they are now, because they had to buy back this territory, they're now able to protect it. They're now able to express themselves inside their own homelands. And so I want to show you a short video so that you can get a sense of what we want to highlight. We just want to give a shout out to those who were involved in reclaiming this land and further fulfilling the LANDBACK prophecy. We all know we have a ton of work to do in that regard. But Control, if we could show that video, I'd appreciate it very much.
So today it's a blessing of the Amsak Spa. It's the place of the boulders. People have inhabited the Wallowa Valley for thousands of years and were removed in 1877 after the discovery of gold on our reservation and forcibly removed to the reservation in Idaho. So today it's a blessing of the land and prayers for our ancestors and for our future generations that are yet to come. That blessing is very important for the future generations and especially for our ancestors to be able to hear our voices and to feel our moccasins on the ground again and hear the songs that are going to be sang today. You know, there'll probably be a lot of tears of sorrow, but tears of joy as well. And, you know, we would hope that our ancestors will feel the tears of joy and their tears will turn to joy because they see our people come back to the land that we belong to. And our people know that we sprang from this land and we're tied to the land in that manner, and the land is also tied to us in the same way.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to give a shout out again. If there's anybody out there in Nimiipuu country or Nez Perce country, please send word around and keep that energy going. You know, keep that same energy. We know that your people entered into a treaty with the United States in 1855, and that, you know, 8 years later, I don't know the full history there, but if there's somebody out there who wants to come on the show at some point, we welcome that. It's just, we wanted to highlight that. We know that you all lost 90% of your land. By treaty, you had access and control and ownership to your nation, which was 7.5 million acres. And through the colonial process, you were reduced to 750,000 acres in between 1863 and 1877. And 1877, that's important because October 5th is when people were given these ultimatums to return to these reservations. They were given these ultimatums that, you know, if you were caught outside of these areas of confinement, you would be declared hostile. This is 1 month after Crazy Horse was assassinated at Fort Robinson. That was September 5th, 1877. And 1 month later, this happens. You know, the very a dark instance in Nez Perce history, and you know, some 140 years later, you're able to return, you're able to reclaim and protect some of the land. So we just want to say thank you. We want to make sure that your people and your leaders all, I know that there's a lot of descendants of Chief Joseph. I know that, you know, you all evaded, you tried to make the run to Canada, just like Sitting Bull did. Chief Joseph and 700 of his people, Nez Perce people, were being hunted by 5,000 US troops during that time, and they almost made it to Canada. They were literally 40 miles away from their destination. And in those times, this was right after the Battle of Little Bighorn, our people had to flee to what's called grandmother's country because of what the colonizers were doing. You know, that grandmother's country, that's like the Queen, you know, the Queen of England. That's who still ultimately, I mean, in my opinion, all of these different colonial projects of the British Empire are all still very much tied, you know, to their source. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. But nonetheless, we could evade American colonial forces by going north of the Medicine Line there. And that's what Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce were trying to do. In that process, 230 people of those 700 died fleeing the United States military. And now the Nez Perce people get to reclaim land where Chief Joseph actually held council. Axapa. I don't want to mispronounce that. The place of the boulders, you know, where not only did Chief Joseph hold council, they are performing their sacred fishing rite of the salmon people. You know, all throughout these lands, indigenous nations still have those relationships, even though we're littered and covered with highways and fences and park boundaries, private land boundaries. All of these colonial concepts are at work in our actual lives, forcing us to navigate the reality that they're imposing. And this show is extremely serious. I mean, cut to the chase, some people might be like, yo, you got to share some happy things once in a while. You got to cover sports once in a while. You got to cover the powwow once in a while. And we will. But a lot of what happens on this show is designed so that our people, our young people, will get a sense of their authority. And that also happens in these other arenas. But through the colonizer's language, through the software that is running a lot of our consciousness right now, this pirate language, the English language, because I have studied that software, I'm able to communicate. I've studied it in different disciplines in my career, in my life. I'm able to use that and try to break things down that confront indigenous peoples, that confront the oppressed castes in these colonial countries. And I want to end by highlighting what has happened in what is now called South Dakota. There is a place here called Canton, South Dakota, where there is now a golf course. And shout out to Dana Lonehill, rest in power everlasting. She was a writer. She's an author, and Last Real Indians was honored to publish Dana Lonehill's work when she was here, in this realm with us. But that's the first place that I heard of the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum. the only such asylum in this country. So just recently, because of, man, I saw some number that indigenous children, the mass graves at these church-run, government-sponsored institutions have reached as much as 5,000 young people. 5,000 of our babies, all the way up into the 1990s. It's unconscionable. And that is causing a reckoning in some of the states, some of those who were born into colonial families, those who didn't know they were settlers, didn't know that a violent settler mentality was being passed down to them, one which otherized indigenous peoples, otherized anyone who was different than the European Christian hetero patriarchy. Anyone who was outside of that was otherized. Women, people who were called different races. You know, Europeans invented the concept of race and are still using it to perpetuate the unjust reality of white supremacy, of all of that subjugation. In that process, in our experience here, during contact with the colonizer, we were confined. You know, we call these places reservations or tribal nations, but our word for these places is Okashke. Wazi aha Okashke, the place of confinement on Pine Ridge. Ian Wosla Okashke, the place of confinement at Standing Rock. These are places of confinement, and that confinement continues to this day, legally, politically, economically, in all ways imaginable. There is still a genocide. The Indian wars have not ended. And because the truth is finally coming out, the truth is burning everything in its path, but we'll be able to rebuild in its wake. That goes for all of us, not just the indigenous peoples, but in South Dakota, this insane asylum, as it was built, is now having to confront its horrific past. And to give you a sense of what I want to address as we close out, cut to the chase, number 26. Thank you all for logging on. Thank you all for sharing this stream. Most importantly, thank you for sharing this stream and subscribing to our podcast. That's where you can hear all previous 1 hour or even sometimes, 100 minutes. 100 minutes of content. Decisive, hard-hitting analysis with honorable guests. I mean, the shows lately, because I've been so busy, we haven't been able to book a whole lot of guests, but there's a bunch of dope guests waiting to come on. It's just that I can never think past, a couple days, a couple sunrises and a couple sunsets. But thank you all for your support. It means the world. I want to show you this video so you can get a sense of the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum. Control, if we could roll that video in, and then I'll talk about it after we conclude.
Most golfers hitting the links at the Hiawatha Golf Course in Canton probably don't realize what lies between the 4th and 5th fairways. A small cemetery, a reminder of South Dakota's dark past, is marked off by a wooden fence tied with ribbons and feathers.
As we enter from the west side, we come across the monument that has 120 names of those that we know are interned here.
At least 120 Native Americans lived in deplorable conditions until they died at the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum. In all, 400 Native American inmates were housed here over 3 decades.
The threat around the country, and we've been told by elders that they heard this in boarding school, that if they were bad, they would be sent to Canton, and everyone knew it was a death sentence. If you were sent there, you didn't really come out.
All that remains today of the Asylum building is part of the front entrance, which has been incorporated into a sign for the golf course. A few original barns are also still standing. However, several keepers of the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum story are making sure what took place here is not forgotten.
People vanished out of boarding schools. People went to jail and didn't come back. So people didn't know where their relatives were. So it's still a shock. It's like finding out that you had somebody in your family who was in a concentration camp.
The concentration camp analogy is not far-fetched.
And there actually is some evidence that Hitler studied what we did with the reservations, the boarding schools in Canton to figure out how to create the concentrations that he created in Germany for the Nazis. So it's a worldwide story, not just a local story.
A horrific story of shocking conditions.
It's not an insane asylum. It's a prison. People are shackled to beds with chamber pots, even though it was state-of-the-art with toilets and running water and all of this. The place was caked in soot. People are lying in their feces, maggots crawling on them.
Disease ran rampant and untreated. While Richard Pettigrew is often hailed as the founding father of Sioux Falls and South Dakota's first senator, he had a hand in Hiawatha.
So Senator Pettigrew saw this as his solution to the Indian problem, and he also saw it as a moneymaker.
A moneymaker it was. Thousands of tourists flocked to the asylum, buying up souvenir plates and spoons.
Did the tourists see how people were treated?
They only were allowed in at certain times, certain days.
Complaints about what was going on in Hiawatha led to more than 24 investigations by federal authorities, but it was never enough to shut it down.
And there's reports that say these poor people are stuck in this terrible place, but they're going to have to stay here till they die.
Wow, that really happened in America?
Here.
Here, South Dakota.
It happened right here.
Right. 53 tribes are represented in this cemetery from all over the nation.
Only 2 grave markers have surfaced. And while the burial map lists 121 names, ground sensing technology indicates there may be even more bodies.
They found in the first row on this side 7 other anomalies that do not have names on the plot map. So we don't know.
There are suspicions there are bodies elsewhere. We know that some bodies were shipped back to reservations, but we're not really sure how often that really happened.
It's always been a battle or a massacre, or, I call this the slowest massacre on record because they just slowly did away for 30 years with our Mitako Oyase.
Jerry Fogg is an artist and member of the Yankton Sioux tribe.
When we do talk of our people and stuff, we say Mitako Oyase, which is we are all related. And even though we don't know these people and we have never met their relatives or anything else, in spirit, we are all related in who we are.
Fogg uses his art to keep the story of Hiawatha alive.
I talk about my artwork and then I come across a piece that I've done on Hiawatha. And I mention, this is the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum, and everybody starts looking at each other. What? And I said, yes, this is, outside of Canton. And then, they find it hard to believe.
The horrors that took place here aren't well documented, and even those records were sealed for 70 years, not being made public until the early 2000s. Only a few artifacts remain, like these dolls made by an inmate. After Hiawatha was finally shut down in 1933, the building changed hands a few times before being dismantled. The cemetery is the only physical reminder of the suffering Native Americans endured.
It's quite a humbling and kind of emotional experience when you come in and you feel the spirit that's here. It's a dark place in our history, but it's something that has to be brought out.
Nobody is here to take care of these 53 different tribes, 124 plus Native Americans. Nobody's there to speak up for them. They lay out there in the cold and the heat without any representation. And I am very happy for the keepers to come forward and include me in this process of informing the public. Now we just got to get a bigger voice.
You may be wondering why the asylum's land was turned into a golf course. That happened in the 40s, and because it was federal land, it could only be earmarked for public use. There are rules to keep golfers from playing in the cemetery.
I can't even process that, and I want to thank Laura for saying that a golf course insane asylum is like making a resort from a concentration camp. You know what? As indigenous peoples, we almost like get abstracted from our own lives, our own experiences here, just from the gravity and the depth of what we've lived through. This is not a dark chapter. This is the stated policy of this country. If you look deep enough, just like when we tried to grow hemp in 1998, when we tried to free ourselves, the federal colonial system, I know this because I'm a lawyer and I studied that for all the while I was in law school. And then I got to see it firsthand, the impacts of it. We have not gone through this. It's not something in our ancient past that is now somehow being exposed. This is something that impacts us to this day. This is why there is a dissonance in indigenous peoples when we speak of the church's presence, when we speak of a foreign and alien worldview imparted to our people, meant to degrade us and to cause us to degrade ourselves. This is why there is horrible levels of the symptoms of an imposed poverty culture. Growing up on a reservation in a place of confinement on a tribal nation is unlike anything that we can describe fully. We're slowly getting the platforms. We're slowly telling our stories. And we've been trying to, I've been personally, dedicated to this mission of speaking about these truths. I can see all of the young generation, the younger people, taking it further than we could have ever imagined. We probably took it further than our parents and our grandparents could ever have imagined. The Hiawatha Insane Asylum, Indian Insane Asylum. I talked to my older brother, Joe Brings Plenty. And he had a grandfather there, Joe Brings Plenty, former chairman or president of the Cheyenne River Sioux tribe, currently is in Akichita. He's on the police force there, but he and I organized the Wounded Knee Survivors Run every winter, December 29th, 30th, and 31st, to honor and commemorate the path that the survivors of the Wounded Knee Massacre took after that fateful day, that horrible, horrible day. Again, these things are so, they have so much gravity that for me, just to speak about them, it's almost as if I'm abstracted from the experience, because my literal family, my literal great-grandfather, great-great-grandfather, his wife, their children were there. And that goes for every other descendant. I mean, so many people are descended from all of these horrible experiences. But Joseph Brings Plenty had a grandfather that went to this asylum. And I don't think he made it out. Maybe we can get Shie Joe to come on later on. But this asylum was started in 1899. That's when the United States Congress authorized its formation. Through the course of 3 decades, it took its first patient. That's what I was going to tell you is Joe. I learned this from Joe Brings Plenty. People were sent to this asylum. This is a way that the government and the churches targeted our medicine people, our people who were receiving instructions, receiving signals, dreams, visions, enhanced interpretive and perceptory abilities. Because how can you declare an Indian insane? How does a Western metaphysician or a European Christian clinical psychologist, informed clinical psychologist, get the space or dare to step forward and declare somebody else insane? That is like that is caucasity beyond caucasity. I can't even imagine that. I can't even think of that. But this is where they would send our medicine people, because they wanted to kill the Indian and the child, kill the Indian, save the man. And they targeted people like Crazy Horse, people like Sitting Bull. They targeted spiritually gifted people because they would not bow down. They would not go along with the program. Same thing on Pine Ridge in the 70s. They targeted spiritual people, people who were strong, who are still unconquerable, who said, no, we won't allow you to come into our homeland, inflict damage on our families. This same spirit was alive here. I saw it when Kristi Noem threatened to breach Pine Ridge borders. You saw AIM people, you saw goon people, you know, who were inside those labels in the 70s, trying to heal from that, coming together by the thousand and saying, Kristi Noem and 3,400 National Guard members are not going to breach our borders today, or if they do, it's over our dead bodies. That kind of sovereignty, that kind of authority comes from a spiritual authorization. It comes because we know that we predate these colonizers who are relative newbies. They're relative noobs. They are immigrants. They are foreigners. They've only been here for a couple hundred years. But it encourages me to see people like what you just saw on Kelloland, on that news source, settlers being truthful about their colonial identities, being truthful about the horrors that have happened, the 400 Native people who were cycled through an insane asylum, of which 120 or more died there and are commemorated in that plaque on a golf course. Untold numbers tried to escape and died, were killed in their attempts to escape over those 30 years. And you have to think about what indigenous people have been through. We've been through genocide and then courts which were filled by our own people to internally oppress each other. The colonizer created, the United States created courts of Indian offenses where indigeneity was criminalized. You would be thrown in jail if you were out trying to run or go into a sweat lodge. You would be thrown in jail, criminalized, or worse, assaulted or killed if you were trying to run a Sundance, or if you were trying to participate in any of our pre-contact ceremonial protocols, which sustain us to this very day and will sustain us 1,000 years into the future. There is a reckoning happening in this country, and you can see it. I never would have thought I would see that on this local news station, that they would talk about the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum in that way, in a truthful way, in a way where you can clearly see settlers are ready to deal with the genocide, the slavery, the traumas that their forefathers and foremothers inflicted on us. And it's happening now for whatever reason. It was ordained to happen this way. So we saw that item about the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum, and I couldn't even, it's hard to keep it together for the purpose of, transmitting the substance of what I'm feeling, what the analysis is. I mean, when you're able to log on, you can get that in real time, but also you can subscribe to our podcasts to get the benefit of this introspection, because it's happening on a countrywide level. It's not just indigenous peoples. It's Black Lives Matter. It's people of other religions who are villainized, who are otherized, who are now coming together and recognizing that, yes, the racial oppression and all of that class-based subjugation is very real. There is also a working class subjugation, and we've got to find out how to survive. Those same forces that caused the Hiawatha Indian Insane Asylum are the same forces that shot Tara Hauska with bodily injurious bullets. They're the same people who are drilling right now by Red Lake Treaty Camp. They're the same people who threw Tasha Martineau on the ground and cuffed her, and somehow by the graces she was released. They're the same people that try to build the Keystone XL pipeline. The same people that are charging Oscar High Elk with trumped up charges and trying to put him away for 16 years. They brought out Marty Jackley to be the prosecutor on Oscar High Elk's case. I mean, the list goes on. I've talked about Standing Rock so many times. It's like these same forces are not stopping. They're still at it. We've got more people in our government. We've got more people running for local governments. We've got more people willing to speak up, willing to put their body in harm's way. And we need that right now at Line 3. But I want to thank you. I always intend to just do this show in an hour. But I always go over, and I always am grateful that you stick it out with me. You stick it out with our crew. It's not just me. I get to be the one on the camera, spending this time with you, this time and space with you. You could be anywhere else right now. But I want to thank you for coming to the show. I want to thank you for sharing it. I want to thank you for making it what it is. And I know that our whole crew feels the same way. So thank you to our sponsors, Lakota People's Law Project. You can now catch us on Indigenous Peoples Movement. I want to thank the brothers at Last Real Indians. I owe you all phone calls. I owe like too many people phone calls. It's ridiculous. But I'm doing my best to navigate these very trying times. And I know that you are as well. So from here, from the sacred lands of the Lakota people, I want to say thank you. And this has been Cut to the Chase, number 26. And we are out.